cashier at a BP that was right off the interstate. It doubled as a truck stop and was open 24 hours. I had worked there for about a year, so I was fairly comfortable with the job, and I was used to working night shifts alone, despite being a smaller female.
Now,
So I was working one night and everything was going as usual. It was about 1 a.m. and I saw a pickup truck pull in. 3 passengers got out and entered the store. The 2 men were wearing camouflage outfits and the women were wearing jeans and a sweater. The men talked to the women outside of the door before entering, and then they all went straight to me at the counter and asked for some cigarettes. As the one man was paying, the other one went on the other side of the store looking at drinks. I looked at the woman and realized that she had a look of panic on her face. I immediately felt in my gut that something bad was going on. We made eye contact and she mouthed the words, "Help me." Then the man grabbed his cigarettes with one hand and the woman's arm with the other and yelled at his buddy that they were ready to go. I was only 19 and wasn't really sure what to do, so I waited until they walked out the door and slid my hand under the counter and I hit the panic button. About 5 to 10 minutes later, the cops showed up, and I told them what happened. They looked at the surveillance videos and told me that they were investigating a kidnapping with the description of the same vehicle. I told them which direction they went on the interstate, and the rest of the officers left after them. I never did find out if they caught them or not.
damn.
A girl in my high school English class was about 4 at the time of this story. She lived in a house backing onto a park with no fence around the backyard. She had a glass sliding door in her room that opened out to the park. It's the middle of the night and she's asleep. She hears a banging at the door. Being a little kid, she hides under the blankets. In the morning, there's a dead woman covered in blood outside the door. Blood smeared down the glass. Apparently, she was attacked in the park, ran for help and was trying to get someone in the house to help her. Ended up getting stabbed to death on the girl's back porch. Scary thing happened to my oldest brother once. I'm a little hazy on the details of who this was or why it happened, but my brother was at a guy's house doing some work one time. The guy offered my brother a beer after the work was done, so my brother went into the living room while the guy poured a couple of glasses. When he came into the room, my brother noticed that the beer had no foam on top, while the guy's beer did, which meant his own beer might have something in it which was causing it not to foam. Suspicious, my brother asked for a snack, and when the guy went to go get it, he scooped the foam off the guy's glass and put it on his own and switched the glasses. The guy came back and they drank, and in no time the guy was out like a light. My brother bolted out and called the cops. They arrested the guy and searched his house, and they found lots of wallets containing other men's IDs and cards. They also apparently found remains of bodies in his wall or his closet or something. About 3 years ago, I was at my parents' house alone. While watching a movie, I fell asleep. About an hour later, I woke up to see a man covered in blood standing in the middle of the living room. I was a little freaked out, to say the least.
Little freaked out my ass.
I ran out of the front door trying to get away. It was then that I saw a totaled truck in the road in front of the house. Turns out he had wrecked his truck and wandered into the nearest house looking for help. I called 911, ambulance came, guy was okay, just a concussion.
Concussion, huh?
A couple of my friends wanted to go bar hopping, so we got a little tipsy. Around 11 p.m. I went outside to smoke. Then boom, I woke up at my house in my bed the following morning. I don't recall even leaving the bar, let alone how I returned home. I had multiple missed calls from my buddy. I called him up to see what happened, and he said I just disappeared. The creepy part is, after I got off the phone with him, I went to the restroom, to realize some way, somehow, during this time I went MIA, I had received a haircut and someone shaved my face. Weird. I do my business only to realize my wiggly bits had been groomed as well, with expertise precision. I must add, it was not a missed hair, or a nick or a cut. Still to this day, I don't know what happened, but upon sharing this story with other friends, I was spotted at other bars throughout the nights, pre-haircut and alone.
Dude, man got drunk. Oh, what the fucking forget?
If you've never heard of U-Pack, that's okay. We don't spend money on expensive TV commercials.
While retail lenders are shrinking, independent mortgage brokers are growing fast. Why? Because they give borrowers more choices, lower rates, and better, faster service. They're also a better place for loan originators to work because they offer a more flexible schedule.
I just moved into a basement suite. Every time I went out, I would lock the deadbolt, but not the door handle. But when I came home, a lot of the time, the deadbolt would be unlocked, and the door handle would be locked. At first, I thought I was just confused about which one I had locked, so I started paying more attention. It just kept happening, and I realized someone must be coming in and out when I left. I assumed it was the landlady, and I was annoyed but didn't say anything at first. Then one day I came home and found the wrong lock, locked again. I went in pissed off and opened the fridge to get something to eat. There was a book in the fridge that I had never seen before. I collected old books, and this one was published in the early 1900s, which creeped me out completely because it was like it was left there for me. I finally called my landlady and asked if she was going into my apartment and told her what had happened. She freaked out immediately and said the last person who lived there was a really creepy guy with mental health issues and a drug problem. She got all the locks changed and it never happened again.
Didn't think to
When I
change
was
those
14,
beforehand?
my parents left me home alone overnight for the first time. I grew up in a small farming community, so my parents really had nothing to worry about. They left and I decided to take an awesome bubble bath and paint my nails like all girls do everywhere, obviously. While I was in bath, I heard our back door open. I thought I was hearing things and decided I had locked all the doors per my mom's orders. But then I heard the kitchen floor squeaking. I didn't know what to do, so I just went under the bubbles and left my head out. I saw two shoes through the crack between the door and the floor. I could hear a person breathing. They stood there for about 30 seconds and then walked away. I heard the door slam, but I didn't move. I just stayed there until the water was freezing while I was crying. Then I got out, called my grandma, and checked the doors. The back door was unlocked and the lock hadn't been messed with or broken. Later that week, we learned that a man was breaking into farmhouses and raping girls. Back in the 1970s, my grandfather dropped my grandmother, my mom, and her two sisters off to do some shopping on his way to work.
Oh, I thought you meant like
Since he
dropped him. I was
wasn't
like,
able to pick them up, they hitchhiked home.
wait.
My mom at the same time was only around 10 or 11. Her middle sister was around 7 or 8, and the youngest was about a year old. They get picked up by a guy in a pickup truck who has them all sit in the back row with one of them holding the baby. My grandmother was giving directions to their home from the highway. But the guy ignored her and went by their exit and claiming that he had something to do. He had to make a stop first. He didn't really say much else to them during the drive. My mom remembers my grandmother being very, very quiet and very nervous. Eventually, they come up to a farm. The driver tells them to wait in the car and goes inside the house. While he's gone, they just sit there terrified. They're in the middle of nowhere and know they couldn't make it out on foot. A few minutes later, the driver comes out with a second guy who looks into the truck and sees my mom and my younger sister. He starts flipping out, screaming at the driver that he shouldn't have brought them here. He shouldn't have brought the baby. They aren't going to do anything with her, and some other things I can't remember. But he ends up telling him to get them away from the farm. The driver gets back into the truck, apologizes, and they get back onto the highway and drive again in silence. My grandmother, normally a very smart woman, had him drive directly to their house. Although I suspect her reasoning was she'd already given him the address before anything seemed weird. They lived at that house for several years and luckily never saw either of them a second time. When I was about 9 or 10, my older brother and I had a few friends over to stay the night. My dad had to work the next day, so we were all left at the house by ourselves for the day. We were excited to play PlayStation all day on our Saturday off. Well, my dad worked late that night until probably 8 or 9. As soon as the sun went down, we went into one of the rooms upstairs to play Uno. Fast forward 30 minutes and we started hearing footsteps slowly walking up the wooden stairs. My dad wasn't going to be home for another 2 hours, so we didn't know who it was. There were 4 of us, me, my brother, my friend, and his friend. We would take turns walking out of the room to see what it was, but before we could look down the dark stairs, we would hear that weird sound of what sounded like someone running down the stairs as fast as they could, so we couldn't see them. This continued for probably 2 more hours, ending with all of us huddled in the room upstairs with the door wedged shut with a chair until my dad got home.
Smart.
None of us were really believers in anything paranormal, but a child's imagination is a crazy thing. Now, 15 years later, I still don't know what to make of it, but every one of us heard those footsteps walking up those dark stairs. I bring it up to my friend who I'm still friends with, and he remembers it just as vividly as I did. It kind of creeped me out just thinking about it. A few years ago, a mother and a father decided they needed a break, so they wanted to head out for a night on the town. So they called their most trusted babysitter. When the babysitter arrived, the 2 children were already fast asleep in bed. So the babysitter just had to sit around and make sure everything was okay with the children. Later in the night, the babysitter got bored, so she wanted to watch TV, but she couldn't watch it downstairs. They didn't have cable downstairs. So she called them and asked them if she could watch cable TV in the parents' room. Of course, the parents said it was okay. But the babysitter had one final request. She asked if she could cover up the large clown statue in their bedroom with a blanket or cloth, because it made her nervous. The phone line was silent for a moment, and the father, who was talking to the babysitter at the time, said, "Take the children and get out of the house. We'll call the police. We don't have a clown statue."
Oh, hell no.
The children and the babysitter got murdered by the clown.
Oh, fuck!
It turned out to be that the clown was a killer that escaped from jail. When I was a kid, I didn't realize until years later that I was almost kidnapped. I grew up in a small town, out playing in the yard with my 2 younger siblings like every other summer day. A guy pulls up alongside the yard in a truck and calls me over. He asks my name and if I'm having a good summer. He says he could really use some help right now because he's looking for his lost puppy. He says he could show me a photo if I come closer. So I walk closer, and he says, no, come a little closer.
No. Good
The
right here.
picture is small and I can't really see it. I don't know. I yell for my brother Dan to come help us find the puppy, who's on the other side of the yard. I have to assume he thought I yelled Dad because he just ran away. He screeched out of there like there was no tomorrow. I remember being really worried about that puppy until we had an assembly at our primary school about things strangers might say to lure you into their vehicles. And that's when I started thinking I was almost kidnapped.